I just published my first novel, and I released it as a paperback as well as an ebook. From the beginning, I was determined that if I was going to print this book, it was going to be an eco-friendly book. After all, this is a climate fiction, and I'm a climate activist, and I'm also an ebook reader. So if I was going to print this, I was going to use that experience to learn something and, if possible, advance the state of printing in a way that reduces, the climate impact of printing books. So I've decided that for this book and any future books and any future products, I'm going to release a report about how I did in terms of being eco-friendly or green or carbon neutral, or the many terms that we use to describe the changes that industries need to make to decrease their contribution to climate change. And I will have some thoughts about those different terms because I think the words we use affect the choice of action we make. So going into this, I knew that any impact I have, positive or negative, is going to be small. And also I knew that, the perfect printing process doesn't exist yet. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how close I got to my goal. What are the things I succeeded at and what are the things I failed at, because there is going to be room for improvement. And I'm hoping that, future products, future books, I'll get closer and closer to the ideal. And I'm also hoping that, what I learned from this process will be helpful to you and will be applicable to anyone who's trying to do something similar. We will continue to improve on this. So the first question is, what was my goal? I am not aiming to minimize my carbon footprint. If I did, I would just not release an ebook because the lowest carbon footprint is always 0, which is achieved by just not doing the thing. And I will explain why I am not choosing to minimize that. I was looking for actions that satisfy 2 criteria. One is that they can scale, because as I said, I'm not going to be able to have a huge impact no matter what I do. I'm one person doing one thing. But could this scale? Could other people do this? Is it accessible to a big enough segment of the population that it could make a difference? And the second thing is, if it scaled, would it have a clear strategic impact? So there's a lot of so-called climate action that doesn't meet these criteria. There's often a natural limit to how much it can scale. There's only so much you can reduce your own impact. There's a certain minimum amount you need to consume in order to just sustain your life. And also, you can't necessarily spread some of these actions to the entire population. There are people to whom these actions are inaccessible, either because of their geographic location or their economic circumstances or their life circumstances. Or if they did scale, they wouldn't really move us forward in a clear strategy.
This explanation is easier for me to narrate in voiceover, so I'll overlay this part with a speed paint of me working on my book cover. So in case you were wondering if this video is just a thinly veiled ad for my book, of course not. It's not veiled. So I referred to some types of climate action as so-called climate action earlier, and I don't think I meant to shade it that hard. A lot of common climate advice advocates for making changes to your consumption habits and in your own life. You probably know the ones I mean, things like buying local, taking more public transport, avoiding buying plastic, and these actions are often well-intentioned, and I certainly don't discourage doing them. My point is more that it is well past time to be more strategic and aim much higher. More insidiously, mainstream environmentalism has been basically infiltrated by corporate propaganda. The language of going green and minimizing your carbon footprint has been used by members of the oil and gas industry to funnel us towards the least effective actions. I wrote an essay about this a couple years ago, and it is linked in the description, and I will flash the reference number on the screen. That's right, this video has references. All this to say, I'm not opposed to people making lifestyle changes. I've made many of them myself, but I regard them not so much as actions as ways of affirming my values to myself and experiments that provide me the experiential data that I need to do the kind of theorizing and strategizing that I'm about to do in this video. And for you, I would say that if you have made these types of lifestyle changes, keep doing them and give yourself more credit for swimming upstream against the system, and think a little bit about how the system ought to change in order to support you and others in making these choices easier. And if you haven't made these lifestyle changes and it feels accessible, like a good first step into entering the climate movement, then go ahead by all means. It does work as a first step and a gateway to bigger actions for a lot of people. And if that's you, then let that be your first step. On the other hand, if you haven't made these changes and it doesn't feel accessible, or even isn't accessible because of where you live or your life circumstances, then I would say just skip that step and go straight to advocating, innovating, using your voice. Let's not make lifestyle a purity test for people participating in the movement, because the participation is way too important, and we are well aware that the system actually makes it really hard to have a so-called green lifestyle by design. So I've said a whole lot about what my goal isn't, but what actually is it? What am I trying to create? So there's this concept called the circular economy. And the idea is that instead of kind of linearly moving materials from raw material that you take from nature into products and then into waste that you throw away, you kind of recirculate materials back into industry. So it's a whole different model for industries as a whole. And so if you're thinking about recycling, if you're thinking about composting, you have the right idea. Let me read you a description from the excellent book Doughnut Economics by Kate Raworth. It runs on renewable energy, from solar, wind, wave, biomass, and geothermal sources, eliminating all toxic chemicals and, crucially, eradicating waste by design. It does so by recognizing that waste equals food. Instead of heading for landfill, the leftovers from one production process, be they food scraps or scrap metal, become the source materials for the next. The key to making this work is to think of all materials as belonging to one of two nutrient cycles: biological nutrients, like soil, plants, and animals, and technical nutrients, such as plastics, synthetics, and metals. The two cycles become the butterfly's two wings, in which materials are never used up and thrown away, but are used again and again through cycles of reuse and renewal. The butterfly here refers to a famous diagram called the butterfly diagram that depicts the two cycles as if they were wings of a butterfly. I have this up on the screen. So the circular economy is one vision of how industries can transform to mitigate climate change. And it's not the be-all, end-all, but I think it is a good target to aim for. And aiming for it will require massive research, transformation, innovation, and so it's no small thing. We will need to design new products, new materials, new industrial processes, and redesign a whole lot of our supply chains. So all of that can sound very daunting, but transformation of that scale does happen, and it happens through a lot of people doing small experiments and finding things that can scale. So now the question of why do a print book and not just an ebook? When it comes to engaging with different industries, I have a framework of sorts that I call eliminate, resize, transform. And I put most industries into one of these three buckets as what I would hope would happen to them. Eliminate is stuff that I think is just plain wasteful, has no redeeming qualities, or might even be predatory. These are industries I think should not exist. Obviously, I don't have the ability or the power to eliminate these industries yet, but this is more of a decision framework for me and how I engage with industries. So if I think an industry is straight up bad and doesn't need to exist, I will, to the best of my ability, not engage with it or boycott it if I can. Not a whole lot of industries fall into this category. You can probably guess which ones. I feel that way about some kinds of social media and digital technologies and cryptocurrency and possibly generative AI, though it may not be all the way in this category. Also, some kinds of cheap mass-produced goods that don't have much utility. But interestingly, it's not a whole lot of technologies. I think most industries fall for me in either the resize or transform category, or even more likely both, because pretty much everything needs to transform if we're going to have a circular economy. So, for example, I don't put modes of transport like cars or planes in the eliminate category. I think we need to resize them. I think these industries need to be much smaller because driving, for example, has become our default. And a lot of people would drive a lot less given the chance, given the opportunity and the walkways. And so we should prioritize making that available. However, not everyone can physically walk. Not everyone can physically bike. Sometimes you're carrying things. Sometimes you need to travel farther than you can walk. So we need to plan for a future where driving is just one option among many, rather than its current status of being the dominant mode of transport and the default. And I have a similar opinion about many of the trappings of modern life, our modes of transport, our modes of food delivery. I think we overuse them, and we need to stop doing that, and they need to be resized and become smaller. And in that smaller form, they still need to be economically viable. They still need to be sufficiently accessible to people who need them. And their supply chain needs to transform to be more circular. Oh, and I forgot to add, we can only stop overusing them if the alternative gets built up and we have the time and the space and the infrastructure to wholesale adopt a better alternative. It's not on individuals to make these changes on their own. And the last category is transform, and this applies to every industry that should exist or that continues to exist, and it needs to kind of redesign its products, its material use, its supply chain, and it's not just a matter of making little, patch fixes, incremental changes here and there. It's a good idea to sort of look at where it is right now, start on a blank sheet of paper, and see how could this be a circular process. As an aside, this eliminate, resize, transform framework in my head sounds just like F, Marry, Kill, which is this ridiculous game whose appeal I don't understand at all. But anyway. So where do print books fall in this framework? Do I think print books should exist? And the basic answer is yes. I'm an ebook reader myself, though I have started picking up print books a bit more since starting this process. I've recently learned that a lot of people seem to really prefer reading print books. It seems to be a better sensory experience for some people. People like being away from their devices, which I fully support. Print books are also more robust. They can last in places or situations where you don't have power, you don't have internet access, you don't have cloud storage. And the way tech companies are behaving nowadays, I would never want to make someone's access to reading contingent on owning an e-reader. So this is definitely a place where I want print books to exist as an option to kind of coexist alongside other options. And I don't even think we need to resize printing. We do need to avoid waste and overproduction of books that don't get sold. But also, we're apparently in some kind of reading crisis or literacy crisis or something. And so I'm hesitant to say we should be reading less.
So since I came to the conclusion that print books should exist, and so if they exist, we need to have a circular economy for the printing industry, my goal was for this book to abide by circular economy principles as well as possible in the world we currently live in, and to do as much as possible to help create and expand a circular economy in the future. And again, this needs to scale. I'm just one person, but I'm choosing my actions such that if other people replicated it and if it gained momentum, I think that would move us further along in a viable strategy to transform the industry. So what are the different aspects to consider for a book? There are the pages, the cover, including whatever coats it, the spine and binding, which could include glue and stitching. And there are other considerations like the ink, the energy used, the water used, etc. So let's start with the paper. With the paper itself, there are multiple aspects to that. There's where the paper comes from and where it goes, essentially. So paper is generally both recyclable and compostable, so that's in keeping with a circular economy. Ideally, you want the paper to be created in a way that doesn't harm the ecosystem. So it could be that it's itself recycled, and so you don't need to take anything out of the natural world. It could be that it is tree-free, it is created from some byproduct of some other industry, from some plant that's plentiful. There's paper that's made out of hemp and bamboo, so that's pretty ideal. If it has to be from trees and wood, there is responsible forestry. There's an organization called the Forestry Stewardship Council that certifies the paper industry. And so that's kind of the worst of the good options. And their thing is that they check that you're using responsible forestry and you're managing the forest, taking out only a sustainable amount of wood. So when we look at the pages, I did some research into print-on-demand services.
So let me briefly walk you through the comparison I did before choosing a print-on-demand service. Obviously, these things keep changing, so you're going to want to update my research before you make your decision. So I started with this article on Resize, which is a platform related to publishing. They've compared 9 book printing services. Of the 9, 5 are print-on-demand services. And you have your usual ones. You have KDP Print, Ingram Spark, Draft2Digital, Book Vault, and Blurb. Of these 5, only Book Vault and Blurb offer FSC paper options. And Resize lists Blurb as kind of the more expensive one that's more suited for picture books. So I didn't think it was necessary for my purposes. From this list, the only one I got was Book Vault. But separately from this list, I found 2 other options that use FSC paper, and they are Lulu and BookBaby. So I had 3 contenders: Book Vault, BookBaby, and Lulu. And to be honest, all 3 of them had slightly mixed reviews, like there were some people complaining about things about all 3. And also, since these 3 are smaller than their competitors, there weren't a whole lot of reviews to go off of in the first place. But on balance, I did end up going with Book Vault, partially because Resize likes them, and partially because when I looked into what the bad reviews were about, it was about people who basically didn't get their order. The order didn't go through somehow. And the response from the company was essentially something like this was growing pains, they were expanding into a new country, and they hadn't worked out all the kinks. I found that plausible enough, and also I didn't have any other options, so I went with it. And it's worked out fine. I mean, my book came out really well, without any issues, and I've interacted with their customer support, and they have been alright.
Obviously, this is not sponsored. I will switch to any print-on-demand service that can beat the one I currently have. I have no brand loyalty, but I do think this particular one seems to be making some genuine efforts to improve their supply chain, and I think that's a good sign. And so for that reason, I want to give them my business, because I'm hoping that my dollars will enable them to continue advancing. And again, it all hinges on, are they genuine in trying to advance, or are they just doing this for marketing? I've interacted with their customer service a little bit. I've noticed how they package things when they send them to me. I have reason to suppose that it's at least partially genuine. And that's really all I need, because I want them to be able to compete and expand and outcompete the ones that are worse than them. So that's like a clear step toward a circular economy. So from that perspective, the pages are actually pretty good. They are obtained in a reasonably responsible way, and they can be disposed in a reasonably responsible way. That is unfortunately the high point. When you look at, for example, the cover, I learned that generally covers of books are not commonly recycled. Like even if you recycle a book, the recycle plant will typically not recycle the cover. I would have liked the cover to be completely plastic free because I think plastic is almost fundamentally incompatible with a circular economy. It is not infinitely recyclable, so you can't keep recirculating it into the same supply chain. So that just kind of breaks the premise. So ideally, I would have liked this to be uncoated. That was not an option offered by this company, at least in the US. There is a bit of a trade-off there where if you get a book that's uncoated, it is potentially going to last for a shorter amount of time. So it could get so scuffed up that people just throw it away or recycle it sooner than they would otherwise. And that is actually a bad thing for the circular economy because you want people to use every product as much as possible, get as much use out of it before recirculating it back into the supply. So this is something that comes up over and over. Like people put plastic in things to make it durable, but the plastic is hard to dispose of and is obtained in a harmful way. I think this is very interesting. It's something we're going to have to keep looking into. As far as I know, there isn't anything special about the ink. I think it's just regular ink. For the most part, ink being on paper doesn't stop it from being recycled, but I am hoping that in future we can get ink that is sourced in a responsible way from plant matter or from byproducts, something that doesn't risk pollution in any part of the supply chain. As far as I know, there isn't anything special about the glue either, the binding. It's probably just regular glue. Ideally, I would have liked that to be either biodegradable or recyclable. So one of the challenges is the recycle center would have to know how to process the cover and binding. Because typically, all the books just show up. How do they know which one goes where? So we would want this to be so prevalent that every recycle center is like, where they just say, oh yeah, it's a book spine, I know what to do with that, I compost it. So we would really need this to catch on. So this points to another interesting issue, like not only does the material in the supply chain have to get better, but the recycle facilities need to adapt alongside it so that they know how to process, so that they are able to do the kind of recirculating part of the circular economy. So the other thing I would want would be for the transport and shipping of this to be as sustainable as possible. We would want the energy used in the transport to be renewable. Unfortunately, that shipping network doesn't quite exist yet, and to my knowledge, this company just ships it by normal mail. From what I've seen, their packaging doesn't contain a whole lot of unnecessary plastic. They kind of, when they pack it, they put in paper instead of like packing peanuts or bubble wrap. There is some plastic in the shipping. I think they do need tape. And again, you run into this trade-off again where everyone's preferred solution to preventing things from getting scuffed and damaged is to slather them in plastic. But if you eliminate that and stuff does get damaged, people are going to just buy more stuff. And one of the big things you really don't want is overproduction, right? If people are like, oh, this one's broken, fine, I'll get another one. Just make a whole bunch of extra ones just in case, because they just break all the time. That is also bad. One of the other things you want is for the shipping route to be as local and short as possible. So ideally, if someone ordered this book, it would be printed in the same country as them and shipped to them over as short a distance as possible. Now, this company is based in the United Kingdom. When I first started researching them, they had just expanded into the United States. So if you order in the US or UK, it will be printed in the same country as you. While I was working on this, they did expand into 2 more countries, Canada and Australia. So if you order from any of those places, again, it's going to be shipped from within your country. This is good. The part that's not so good is that if you're in anywhere other than these 4 countries, it will ship from the United Kingdom. That's the only place where they're able to do international shipping. So even if you're really close to one of the other countries, for example, if you're in Mexico, ideally we would ship in the United States and send it over to Mexico. But the way they're set up right now, it has to go from the UK to Mexico. So that's not great, that's inefficient. So from what I researched, it seems like the shipping is not the biggest contributor to the emissions of a product, because it is kind of shipped along with a whole bunch of other stuff. So the marginal addition of one product to the emissions of, say, a barge, or I don't know how shipping works. So, the add of one product to kind of a shipping unit emissions is not super high. So I still think that I ended up with the best available option, but I could be wrong, and I welcome any information or counterpoints that you have. So what I'm hoping will happen right now is that my research will enable you to find the best option for you if you're trying to do something equally eco-friendly, that you won't have to start from the beginning. You can pick up where I left off. The one I chose might not be the most efficient one for you, and it might also be that you don't need print on demand. Maybe local printing in a batch is the most efficient option, because there are more circular economy friendly printers that don't do print on demand. There were local printers that had, plant inks and completely, they had the Forestry Stewardship Council certification themselves, rather than, being one step away from it. They could give you plastic-free everything, plastic-free cover, compostable binding, and all kinds of things, but you needed to kind of order a batch. And so if anyone ordered the book from you, I would have had to pack it and ship it myself. And I know myself well enough to know that I am not capable of running a warehouse in a way that would keep customers happy. So I was limited to print on demand, and I was limited to what was within geographical reach to me. So what I've done is I have this database, I've done some comparisons. You can go through it and find the option that's right for you. It may or may not be the same one as mine. And yeah, none of this is sponsored. I'm going to be critical of everything on this list. None of them are perfect. But I also think when industries are making legitimate changes, not just changes for marketing, but things that are incremental and imperfect, but in my opinion, do get us a step closer to a circular economy, I think we should give them our dollars to help them do that. So my hope is that I can scale what I have done to you. We can do more of what we're doing. We can help companies that are doing this thrive and outcompete the ones that aren't making changes. Because by the way, so many print-on-demand companies aren't even doing the bare minimum, like Ingram Spark, Amazon, whatever. They aren't even giving you an option to select Forestry Stewardship Council certified paper, which is the bare minimum. So we want the alternative to exist, to remain viable. I think also I have been interacting with their customer service. I have been giving them feedback that yes, I want you to keep doing this. I am shopping from you only because of your green commitments, and keep doing it, right? They need to hear back that this is a good strategy for them and they should keep at it. Hopefully you can send that signal as well. Ask people, write to their customer service or whoever the representative of the company is, and say, what are your options for this? For plastic free, for suitable paper. Let them know that they need to keep advancing on this, that at least there is a customer base so they can reach viability. And so if you have companies being viable, I think that is a milestone. And that is a parallel economy, the circular economy, that is proven and can be expanded. And that will be a whole new question that we will have to figure out when we get there. But that's the first step. You can't get anywhere until there are viable options. And I want them to get more and more viable and to keep expanding, right? I want this one to expand into more countries so that it can print local and have a shorter shipping route no matter where somebody orders. I think for now, most of my customers will probably be in the US and UK, if I'm lucky. But I would be thrilled if this company expanded to India so that my aunts and uncles can buy a copy as well. And I'm going to tell them that, right? I'm going to write to them and be like, hey, if you're trying to decide where to expand to next, there's a zillion readers in India, you know? And so I'm hoping that you will do that, I can do that, you know, let's build on this. And yeah, like, do better than me, you know? I did my best with the time and resources and options I had, and I hope you do better. I'm not claiming to be the greenest person out there, and I don't want to be. I want us all to be stopping climate change. I will come back with a similar report for anything I ever release. I hope I can beat myself at this record as well. And so, yeah, go out there, go print stuff.